Yay, hello and welcome. We're going to give folks a minute to join in. But in the meantime, I wanted to say thank you from early. And in the meantime, too, how's your day going, Alex?
So far, good. For those who are watching this, for context of where I am, this is one of the stories of my business. I was doing a co-working space for a while, and then realized I don't want to be at co-working all the time. And a dream of mine has always been to have my own creative space at my house. So we bought this shed, and I'm slowly renovating it. The entrepreneurial risk that's happening today is it's hot outside, and as you can see, this is not finished yet. So I have a little air unit running, and it's been great overall. But I'm coming to you all today from a place of a lot of excitement for our talk, but also it's just getting a little warm here in Virginia in the summertime. So I'm kind of balancing those things together. Otherwise, I'm feeling great, and I'm just really excited to be together with fellow entrepreneurs.
Fantastic. Yes, I love that that you're building your space out. And I feel like that is really in alignment with the subject today. I like the way that in the description of this, how did you put it? Uh, Small business by design.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, just that agency and building out the way you like. I'm sure there's lots you picked up from the co-working space, things that you would do differently and will, and
Yeah.
the ways that you can optimize. So, yeah, thanks for joining in, folks. I see folks coming in. I want to direct you to the chat so we can keep a lively conversation going. You can join in from there. Let us know where you're joining in from, how your day's going, and a bit about your business. You'll find the chat in the center of the screen at the bottom there, the box with some lines in it. Come on in. I already put a message there, so there should be a little blue dot inviting you. And any questions you have for Alex, anything that comes up. And again, as we talk about the subject matter here, I expect different things will be applicable to you and come up for you. So we'll have time towards the end of Alex's presentation to have a discussion period. You can come on camera or microphone if you'd like. And you can also just keep that coming through the chat. I'll be there to moderate. And my name is Stephanie. I'm here representing Novo's community. And Novo is the business banking platform that supports all of the different stages and sizes that you as entrepreneurs build your business to. So thank you so much for being here today. We're really grateful to share space with Alex and our other subject matter experts who are the heart of our community, a resource here to you. And wanted to encourage you always, you may have heard me say it before, take full advantage of the time here today and do keep the conversation going. I'll be sharing ways for you to stay in touch with Alex and with Novo as we continue.
Awesome. Love seeing some familiar faces in here as well. I won't call out too many names, but I do see you friends there. Thanks for coming. Thanks for hanging. I would be curious too, as we get into some of our conversation today, to really ask you what what are you up to in your business? Maybe what are some of your goals? Maybe start thinking about how you would answer this question. What is the mission of your business? It's a little foreshadowing into some of the stuff we'll talk about later, but would love to get to know you guys, where you're coming from, maybe what season of life you're in. Yeah, love it. Thanks for bolding that question for me. I meant to put that on a slide, and here we are. So yeah, what's the mission of your business? Curious to hear that. We'll get into it. Maybe give it, what do you think, another minute, Stephanie?
Yeah. And then I just wanted to say, I guess if we wanted to dive into a little bit of your background, not sure which slide that is, but I'd love to just like begin with your intro.
Yeah. I'm just gonna hang on this slide for now, so I don't get too out of order. I am Alex. I have worked for years in event production and have spent a lot of time as a producer in the event space, but also in the music and the film space as well. So I have also transitioned that into, I really like helping anyone produce creative projects. So whether that's a big thing that needs systems help, whether that's more like creative operations where you need help with a team, whatever that may be, I like helping creative entrepreneurs pursue meaningful work. And I'm committed to helping you do that in whatever way that looks. So sometimes that's through coaching, sometimes that's through like, let's get nitty gritty and automate things together. So whatever that may be, would love to help and get to know you and your business.
Fantastic. Okay, let's go ahead and get started.
Let's do it. Given our little disclaimer before we begin slide to just, like you had said, please engage in the chat. Would love to hear where everyone's coming from and engage as much as we can. Also want to give, as always, a big shout out to Novo. Just thank you so much for hosting this time. I love being here. It's helping me grow my business just because I'm trying to get better at content, and I absolutely love it. So as we get in for today, I want to just give you a quick roadmap of where we're going to go through, and it's going to basically be these 4 concepts. One, we're going to talk about meaningful work. We'll talk about values. We will talk about defining success for our businesses. And then we'll land on defining what is enough for our businesses. But first, I want to share with you a little bit of my story. Started 2 years ago, a little bit before that, but 2 years ago is when I left my full-time job and started working for myself. Why? Well, I realized I was on a path, and it was a path that I didn't want. Right after we had our second kid, my job had bloated beyond my original job description. I kept finding myself in work I didn't really want to do or enjoy. And then even worse, it actually was taking me away from the things that I originally came to that job for in the first place. On top of all of that, I felt this pull. It was this pull to keep growing, to make more money so I could put my kid in daycare, so I could work more, so I could make more money. And the cycle would just continue and continue. And I just started to play out that whole path in my mind and thinking about how that would affect my life and my work in the future. And I didn't love where it was going. I felt exhausted, and I honestly didn't think it made a whole lot of sense. It just seemed like I was going to be on this constant cycle where I would have to keep earning more to do more for my family so that one day I could take a break to spend a lot of time with them. And to me, that just didn't make any sense. So I started to ask myself one of my favorite self-reflection questions: what if? What if this wasn't the path I was on that I didn't want? What if this was the job? What if this wasn't the job I needed to stay in? And then plenty of questions around that. And so I started reimagining what I wanted my life to look like. And then I eventually figured out, what do I want my job to look like into that? Eventually, this led me to leaving my full-time job, and on great terms. I still have great friends there, but then I moved on to working for myself. However, even now, while working for myself for 2 years full-time, I still feel this pull, and I call it the growth pull. What I've learned in business is you can constantly feel this pressure to succeed, and it comes from all sorts of external sources, pressures, and others' expectations. Everyone's going to tell you how to define success for your own business. Even in researching content for this talk, I got turned around, even trying to figure out what is the definition of a successful business? What is the meaning of a business? And a lot of them talk about things I didn't really agree with. Things like how to appease shareholders, how to maintain profit and minimize overhead, and basically do whatever it takes to make business continue to grow. And I wasn't really satisfied with any of those answers. The problem is I was noticing somewhere along the way, business growth has become growth for growth's sake. So as I've worked for myself, I've learned one thing. Your business exists for whatever reason you choose, whatever mission you have. I like to call this your business mission. For me, it's about building a sustainable creative life that puts my own life and family first, not the other way around. And again, like we mentioned in the chat earlier, I would love to hear what you see as the mission for your business. Why does your business exist? So again, if you want to take a minute to just pop it in the chat, I would love to hear that why behind even why you're showing up today or why you got into business for the first place. So while you're thinking through that, I want to keep talking about growth. There are many ways to talk about this, but I really want to boil it down to 2 specific things. But first, I want to be really clear. I'm not against growth. I'm actually very much for growth. And I believe as people, we should always be curious, we should always be learning, and we should always be growing. The problem is, over time, there's this sort of unconscious growth that seems to take place. It winds up being growth for growth's sake. It's almost like unconscious spending, kind of like retail therapy. Everyone's like, I feel bad, so I'm doom scrolling on my phone, and then I found myself on Amazon, so I bought something. Then it gives me a hit of fun for a little bit. I anticipate the package coming in the mail. Then I get it. I'm like, hey, this is so cool. But then within a couple of days, that feeling is completely gone, and it's totally fleeting. And so what I've been trying to challenge us to do and learning in my own life is to replace unconscious growth with intentional growth, which is really the opposite. So this is growth that sets us in alignment with our values and towards the goal we are ultimately trying to reach. It looks less like adding more and more, and instead it looks a little more like pruning, discerning, experimenting, and most of all, keeping the main thing the main thing. So the biggest question then comes, how do we pursue intentional growth? For me, it all starts with meaningful work. If you've been to any of my past webinars or poked around my website, follow me online, or maybe have seen my logo, you've heard me talk about my tagline, which is pursue your most meaningful work. That is what my business exists to do. It exists to help people like you, whether you see yourself as a creative or not, whether you see yourself as an entrepreneur or not. My goal is to help you pursue meaningful work. The reason I've done this is because I believe meaningful work applies to absolutely everybody. For today, that applies to us as entrepreneurs and business owners, but it also applies to people who aren't working a job or people who have alternate jobs, people who are retired. When I define meaningful work, I mean whatever your hand finds to do. And that's going to look different for everyone. Again, for us today, it's here as business owners. Pursuing meaningful work is so important to me because it's one of the reasons I started working for myself. I wanted to have more time to be creative in my life. I wanted to prioritize the things I've had to put on the shelf for years, even though some of those things don't make money for me and they're not necessarily part of my vocation. I consider those part of my meaningful work. So I needed a strategy to understand how I can make a business that also gives me time to focus on meaningful work. Defining meaningful work is important, but it's also difficult because, to be honest, you may not immediately know what it's going to be. So I'm going to ask you, take a moment, consider what meaningful work is. But at the same time, I'm also going to kind of guarantee that if you and I were to have a conversation, we would peel back a layer or two and find out what you have in mind as meaningful work is actually not your meaningful work. There's actually usually a layer or two deeper that is actually your meaningful work. I've run into this with plenty of coaching clients in the past. A good example that comes out is I have a filmmaker buddy who was directing a lot of kind of promotional type videos. That's where his business was, is a lot more promotional based, less narrative. And as we started uncovering what he was really passionate about, it turns out he wanted to write and direct his own films, short film. And then from there, we decided to make a path for how do you pursue that in your work and change that. So what I learned from that, though, is even when we talked was we think that we want to do one thing. And as we talk more about what that thing is, we learn there's something actually deeper beneath the surface. And that is meaningful work. And it's complex and it's messy. So I want to help you uncover what your meaningful work is. But for us to do that, we may need to have another conversation, or I'm hoping to have a future webinar where we can talk a little bit more in depth on that. So stay tuned. But in the meantime, still keep thinking about meaningful work. Because once you've identified that, the next step is to start visualizing what that meaningful work could actually look like in your life. It's to get a little bit practical, which is also tough because this is where you're going to run into things like self-limiting beliefs. You might say, I want it to look like this. How on earth do I get there? How do I make money with this? How do I actually do this? And that is really just the process of prioritizing meaningful work. So for just a second, I want to take a moment and do a little visualizing together. Feel free to take a moment and pause. If it's helpful, close your eyes for just a minute. But while you're here, what I want you to do is I want you to think about your future. I want you to think about you, and it's still you, but your circumstances are different. So assume that you have enough, you're financially set, you are time set, you are not in a season of burnout, you are in a healthy season. I just want you to picture that for a second. Maybe challenging because we're all business owners here and that's hard work. So just imagine you're in a spot. The team is where you want it to be. Your business is growing where you want it to be. You are in a spot where in every aspect of your life, you have enough. Now, I want to ask you some questions. In this scenario, what are you doing with your time? How are you spending your days? Who are you spending them with? Where are you? Are you traveling? Are you somewhere new? Maybe somewhere familiar, but it looks different? Okay, now I want you to come back to where you are here and think through what would it potentially take for me to get to that space I just visualized. Granted, I realize I'm going pretty quick here, so you will need more time to process this. But this is essentially the path to finding meaningful work, is to visualize it from a healthy place and then reverse engineer to figure out what are steps I could take to get there. And again, this is not going to be a simple answer right away. It's going to be something that I want to come back to keep thinking about, start broadening your horizon of what's actually possible in your life. And then we can start talking about how do we start getting there. And first up is values. Values are kind of popular these days, maybe a little bit too popular. They've become a little bit trendy. And so everyone likes to talk about values. Specifically, when I talk about your values, these are the things that you hold to when challenges come. These are the things you're unwilling to compromise on. Your values are based on your meaningful work, and then they help you in a direction towards your mission, even when things get difficult. I personally believe values are meant to be practical. They're meant to help you make decisions. So when a challenge comes up, you can take whatever that decision is, hold it against your values so you can help decide what you need to do. Sometimes values actually conflict with one another, and that is where things get complex, but also a lot of fun. For example, two of my values are staying small as a business so I can minimize overhead and also be competitive and provide great rates for my clients while meaningful work. At the same time, I also really value working with a team. But having a team, staying small, don't those things conflict? And to some degree, maybe. What I found most fascinating is when these two values exist in tension, they can actually unleash you to something new or unlock something new. They show you what actually matters and can often show you a path that works differently than what you were expecting because you weren't willing to compromise on your values. So when I'm thinking about my two, staying small and working with a team, people would say, oh, you want to have a team? Get a team. But what does that mean? A lot of times getting a team means having a lot of overhead, paying payroll, thinking about health benefits, all sorts of things that are extremely complex. For me, I'm not willing to do that. That's not my path because I want to stay small, because I think small and scrappy teams lead to the best creativity. That aligns with my meaningful work. So how do I do both at the same time? For me, I work in a model where when I'm working on a project, I will build things into the project budget so I can hire either a fellow producer, content person, or if I'm subcontracting, whoever that might be for the project, they can come on with me. That's how I treat all my projects. So I'm not taking on the overhead. I can stay small, yet I can always commit to working with a team. So you see how these two values that seemingly conflict, because I wasn't willing to compromise on either of them, it actually led me to a new solution that works specifically for my business and helps me pursue my meaningful work. And this is why I think values are so important. And I want to encourage you, press into the tension when it comes. Moving on from values, the next thing to talk about is actually defining what success looks like for your business. So now we've talked about meaningful work and values, and you have maybe a decent direction of what you're thinking through. We need to actually be clear on what it means to define success for your business. If you're pursuing meaningful work, success is going to look different than other businesses. I talked about this a little bit earlier, just about how business has become so much about making money. And I think a lot of us, if you're here today, you're probably tired of that. You're probably thinking, I don't want it to just be about money. It has to be something else. And so I want to bring you back to that question originally. Why does your business exist? And from there, we define success based on your business entity, why you have it, and your meaningful work. And right now, I just want to tell you, as we talk about this, our only metric for business success cannot be money. If money is the only driver of our success in our business, we will burn out. We will compromise everything that we hold close in value, and we will lose who we are in the process. This has to be bigger than money. If I make a ton of money, but I abandon my values, then I'm not actually pursuing meaningful work. At that point, I'm literally just pursuing something unconsciously, and I've left my growth for the sake of money, and I've left my values behind. So for us, we have to define what success looks like. Otherwise, we will default to whatever is popular in the world at the time. Here's an example. For me, success, again, is always about collaboration. I'm not old per se, but I'm still 34 and I have two toddlers with one on the way. So I'm tired all the time. And I decided years ago, I'm just not going to work alone anymore. So for me, if I make a ton of money on a project, but I did it all by myself, was that really a success in business? To me, no, it wasn't. Sure, I made money. Sure, there will be times that I need to make money just for the sake that I can provide for my family. I have no problem with that at all. But that is not the work that I can continue to do over and over again to sustain my life or to sustain my business. It's not going to work. So for you, for me, it's a matter of taking our values and using those things to help us redefine what success looks like in our business. Next, not just success, but we need to actually start understanding how to define what's enough for our business. So How do we do that? Well, I've seen this happen time and time again. First thing that comes to mind is a story of YouTubers, actually. I've seen so many YouTubers who start their channel, they find growth, they'll start to hire a team, then they burn out because their passion turned into a job. So they post their quitting video, they lay off their team, and then to some degree, they have to start over and over again. It goes for other people I follow on, not just content creator, but other business owners, whatever they may be. They get really good, they wind up finding success, they start to scale unintentionally. They maybe build a team, then they can't sustain the team, and or the stress of paying the team winds up overwhelming them. They realize why they don't love running their business, and they want to get back to the thing that they were actually doing in the first place instead of just trying to run the business. So essentially, they wind up letting their team go, and they have to reset to get back to what they want to do. They scaled too fast, and they didn't do it intentionally. I don't want that for you or for your business. So let's talk about defining enough. And I'll be honest, I actually had a pretty hard time thinking about what I was going to say in preparing for this talk because I kept trying to come up with some clever question to figure out the perfect enough scenario. I wanted to tell you, answer these 3 questions, and that's what's enough for your business. And as I was doing that, of course, is when it clicked. Enough is not really a goal or an end destination. Enough is a journey. Enough is for different seasons of life. It will look different. For me right now, I have 2 kids with 1 on the way. Enough right now for me looks different than enough is going to look like in a couple of years, maybe even a couple months. Enough will change, and that's okay. More importantly, enough is actually a practice. It's a way of life. It's less about getting to an end goal like, I want to have $10 million and I'm finally going to be satisfied, because we all know that's not going to work. We've all probably done that before. I remember the first time I was like, I want to have my first $10,000 month. And then I hit it and I was like, oh, I just want to keep growing. If we don't label enough, we will consistently keep growing unconsciously. So instead, it's about consistently and intentionally asking yourself, are the things that I'm doing in this season of life and in this season of work actually moving me on my path towards meaningful work? That is how we start to uncover what enough looks like for us. But in addition to that, we need to figure out how to practice enough. And I've got a couple of tips for you here. So the first one is going to be standing firm in your values. Be unwavering in your values. The things that are core to you, that you believe in, that are they're on your heart for a reason, and they matter. Stand firm in those values, and you will always have enough. Another one is spend time with people who have enough. There are so many people in this world who just want to get to that next milestone, and they're willing to compromise seemingly anything and everything to do it. Don't be like that. Find the people who are like you, who want to be sustainable, who want to be healthy, who want to grow alongside you and grow with it. The next one is resist unconscious growth. Again, it's easy to go with the flow and just grow without thinking about it. So I would challenge you to resist unconscious growth and instead trade it for intentional growth. It's okay to be intentional, and it will actually lead you to a sustainable life that you love, that actually puts your work where it needs to be, putting your life first and having your work wrap around that. And then my last one, which I'm going to come to all the time, is pursue meaningful work. This is the most important thing for me, is to continually focus on the thing that you're trying to do in your life and in your business, and use your values and your metrics for success to define what's enough, so you can constantly point back towards that thing which is most meaningful to you. So with all of that, what I would actually like to do is help you get back to your meaningful work, the work that you love. I want to help you pursue it. It's the main reason my business exists. That's why you're here today. That's why I'm here today. And so as a thank you for showing up here and hanging out with me, I would love to give you a free 45-minute coaching session to anyone on this call. This is not a sales pitch or an intro call to coaching. This is literally a free 45-minute session where I would love to continue the conversation, talk about meaningful work, and how we could grow our businesses together. And with that said, I'm going to leave this slide up for just a couple minutes and would love to jump into a time of Q&A. Thank you, Stephanie, for sharing that link, as always. And if you don't have any specific questions, I can follow up and ask you some questions, which are, I'm just curious what meaningful work looks like. So I'll call on Corey because he replied, his business exists to support his family while allowing him to do the work he loves and be creative and flexible as he wants to be, which is awesome. to me, holding on to that and using that and letting that be his cornerstone is going to be fantastic for pursuing the work that's most meaningful to him. I'm curious, does anyone else have any questions or comments, or if you want help uncovering what meaningful work looks like to you? And if not, Stephanie, I'm going to ask you what your meaningful work is too, because I know you on the side as well, and I'll just have this conversation with you. Happy to.
Oh yeah, I'm always prepared with questions. I love a good convo. So I did want to dive in and actually when I was going to ask if you had any examples of when either, well, you shared yours, but when a client maybe made a decision that looked like a scaling down, but or you had to encourage them to look at things differently. In order to, and that can be not even just in their business, that can be on a project too, right? Like when you have the scope of something and you have this vision and it starts like, oh well, we can do all these things, wait, why are we, but what do you want to do and why? So could you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So that's actually one of my favorite things is when I'm working in a project with someone and then we have to
Can we
pause.
take the slides down so we can see
Oh yeah,
yours?
absolutely. Absolutely.
Thanks. And again, y'all, the link to connect with Alex one-on-one is in the chat. So go ahead and jump in there. And while you're speaking, I'm going to go ahead and throw other links in there too.
Yeah, love it. Yeah, I love that question, Stephanie. One of my favorite moments that happens when I'm on a project with someone is, I kind of call it a coaching moment, where we might be talking about strategy or the scope or whatever the project may be. And then we'll kind of pause to have a little bit of coaching moment, get big and say, all right, why are we doing this? Does this still make sense? Is there a way that we can kind of reinterpret whatever that project may be to then move forward? And I actually think that's like my favorite part of doing a project is when we have those coaching moments, because a lot of the decisions we make in business are around what's meaningful to us. And if we can keep those values in front of us, it will guide our decisions and make things a lot easier. I'm trying to think if I can come up with a specific example of that of recent. I try to find past ones that are not like current projects, because that can make things a little bit easier. I'll have to keep thinking on it, but if it comes to me, I'll for sure share one.
No problem. And how would you recommend, I think, communicating around these? Let's say someone is considering, like, they made a move to expand, and then they're shifting gears, or sometimes it's a pivot, right? Like, or like we said, with a just a change of plans that you have to communicate out to your network, right? Like when it goes from a decision that you're making to how you're going to explain to others. Do you have any like tips, or have you experienced that yourself where you had to navigate like the line between being a, how do I say this? Standing your ground and holding onto your values, right? Like standing strong in your values, as you said, right? And being a collaborative person, being a, figurehead in your business, or just having to accommodate, wanting to accommodate people, how it affects other people.
Yeah, that's a very good question, very challenging too. I think the hard part with that is on a lot of client projects, you may not know if that person's a good fit for you until you're actually working on that project sometimes. And so I think sometimes what happens is we'll be on a project and we realize, oh, this is actually not really like who I am in business, or not how I want to operate. And again, it depends on your circumstance and how you're running things. For me, I work on a more of a contract basis with people. And so I use that to even evaluate, all right, does this still make sense for us to do things like this down the road? But I would say like one of my values in business is even like, I'm okay with letting my values go for a time to serve someone that I need to in business. And I see it as that's on me if I am working with someone and our values don't align. Instead of like, I'm not just going to drop them and move away, I will try to intentionally make a plan to say, this doesn't really align with my values. And so maybe we don't work together again. But again, my values for like relationships and connection with other people is I would do that in a way that's true to me, which means I'm never going to leave a client hanging. I'm not going to fire them. I'm not going to say like, oh, we're done. even if it's a cost to me, my business reputation and my business values state, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to work with you as best as I can. If I can no longer do that, I will find you someone else who can help you. And then even if that costs me something, and then at the end, if it just is not working anymore, I will just have an honest conversation with you and say, I don't know that this is the best fit for us, but I will find someone else for you. And so again, that's like, if certain values don't apply, other values can come in and apply and say, like, this is who I am. This is how my business works. I'm going to do these things to get to that point. And so again, that's where, like, when your values come into tension, kind of shows you your character. It helps you make those decisions of like, okay, I'm not vibing with this. Like, what the way that they're doing this is not okay to me. But at the same time, my other values say, here's how I respond in that situation. I'm not going to treat you like somebody else might because my values tell me that. So yeah, good question.
Yeah,
Challenging.
I'm glad you said the word tension too, because I was looking at my notes, and I because press on the tension when it comes, and I think that when you talk about, and I really appreciate the way you phrased it or framed it, that you reflected on what your entire life would, what you like to sorry, what you value in your entire life, and then what meaningful work is, as a part of that.
Yeah.
So again, with the kind of ability to hold on to your values, being willing to have more difficult conversations, maybe it makes it easier to have conversations that might be difficult because you're clear on why, and giving you that strength maybe to not just like drop off or hide or acquiesce more than does make sense for you, and then ultimately incur loss. I really appreciate you taking the time to lay this out for us. And I'm hoping that this is I would say if you're watching this in the replay, hit the comment section. I feel like this would be a nice conversation to continue.
Yeah.
And I did want to ask another question about, and y'all are welcome to, I just don't see my blue dot. Please go ahead and put anything you'd like to ask Alex or interject or anything like that into the chat. But I wanted to ask you about the idea of framing your metrics beyond money. And I was curious how you not just frame them, but really like how do you evaluate your metrics then, if in addition to the financial?
Yeah. I mean, it kind of depends on what metrics you've done. For me, one of the ones I come back to is actually creative energy, because I've learned in a lot of my clients who work in creative professional spaces, it's not just about time or money for us. It's actually about that creative energy, where if we spend our time doing a project, that might take away from our reserves of the thing that we want to do. And so part of that is measuring that metric and saying, how do I continually do that over time? And again, it depends on the metric. Money's a little bit easier to track. Creative energy is a little bit more nebulous. So what I try to do, and I've actually been thinking about making a separate webinar or workshop about this, but what I've been trying to do with different folks is actually start to apply value points to a project. So it's really easy to say, I'm considering this one project and it's going to cost me, or it's going to make me $5,000. It's going to cost me 40 hours in time, whatever that may be. The equation is always around money or time, it seems. There's never really been room for like the networking side. We do this all the time as businesses where we're like, hey, I'll do a pro bono project if it doesn't take me a lot of time, but it might lead me to new leads. That's a good example of one. But being even more specific to say, I'm intentionally trying to get myself in front of these people so I can network with this community, might be an example. Is there a way that we could actually put numerical points to those values to say, like, the money is low, the time is low, but the value points are high? And is there a way that we can make those numbers even so that when we're actually scoping out a project, we can realize, okay, it's going to take me a lot of time and the money's kind of low and the value's low, maybe not worth it for me. But if these three values are really high and the money is medium and the time is low, oh, this actually might be really helpful. And so this is me workshopping a little bit of that. But as I've worked with different clients, I've been thinking it would be very helpful to have a metric for just assigning those value points for me to know. Creative energy would be really helpful. Or, yeah, I'm trying to work on I don't know, something else specifically in our business. Again, if there was more people who had like specific business examples, I'd be happy to tailor it to that. I think one that I even think about is I have not done music in a long time. That's my background, was music and audio engineering specifically. It's been a while since I've done that. And so I had a friend who was interested in, she needed help just producing her album. And I'm not doing the music production on it, but I am going to help with promotion, a lot of the production scheduling, getting people together, rehearsals, all that stuff. And for me, I was happy to do that for a low price because the value of me getting back into my musical roots with a person that I love, even if it didn't pay a lot, and also positions myself as a producer in the music space and a creative producer. That was like four levels that they maybe weren't like five on the value scale, but like if those four different values all hit a number of four, and even though it was free, it was like, oh, there's a lot of value in me doing that, even if it doesn't pay well. And so again, the reason I like that is if we can put more metrics to that, we can then look at this project within the whole of that project instead of us just saying, well, that's going to take X amount of hours and that's going to take this. So yes, I have capacity for it. Are you making room in that decision process for your values and how you're intentionally growing? So that's me workshopping some stuff, and maybe that will be another workshop in the future or a webinar or something, but I've got some work to figure that out first.
Cool. I love that because I can imagine it as like a rubric, you know, taking it back to
Yeah.
school where you could, yeah, you have your
Mm.
segments of what value means, and like you can do your questionnaire and you know input your values there, and that way make it both personal and intentional, but like systematized and not overly like not like reactionary.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's brilliant. I think I wanted to ask about, okay, so you've spoken to creatives as I know you do so well. I'm curious then about when it comes to geez, I had it. It was about decision making. Um, oh, okay. Well, I'll have to let that one go. Um, hmm. Okay. I think I am out of my questions.
Totally fine.
Yeah, because the last one, the last thing I wanted to ask about, I think was just more about like how you would actually encourage someone to frame their business if they were like, I guess, starting out. Would you have them start out with a, I guess, like year over year sort of approach, and like, or I guess like when you're starting out fresh as a creative, and you're determining your values and that why does your business exist?
Yeah.
I think a lot of that can come from you, but you also have to be in communication some, I guess, to see
Yeah.
like what is feasible as well. So what were some of the elements that you evaluated when you were deciding to transition from working more, I guess, consistently in your role and then moving into working for yourself? And then when did you remember like another clear transition where, and forgive me if you said this before, but like a clear transition where you said, okay, this is my enough? Like, was it a specific moment, or was it like, yeah, or was it something that you came about like as you had reached a point in your business, if that makes sense? Was it like you made that decision and then you started the business, or did you get into the business then you're like, okay, I don't want to see this get too big?
Yeah. Uh,
Sorry about rambling there.
no, no, great. I'm a verbal processor, as you've probably noticed, so I'm all for it. I think I've always been interested in the kind of minimal. I don't want to say minimalist just because it's a little too trendy these days, but when I mean that, like I've always been in that mindset of like questioning what's enough. Um, and really, it's a lot about satisfaction. Like, how can I do this in a way that is sustainable to me? So I think that's what started first was the like my job was no longer sustainable, and that's what pressured me into say like, all right, this path is not working. I need to re-question that. Then it was enough for me to figure out like what are the things that I'm just not going to do anymore. And I think a lot of finding our values and finding our meaningful work is just by figuring out here are the things that I just don't want to do anymore, or the things I won't do anymore. And so I've even had a friend who's potentially going to leave his job and he's looking at other things. And I was like, as you're doing this, just like make a little list, like name 3 of the things that you will continue to do. And I call it a 3x3x3. I'm a coach, so I just always like making up tools all the time. So 3x3x3. Name 3 things that you really, really want to do. Maybe you haven't done them in the past, but you're itching to do them more. So 3 of those things. 3 things that you're okay to do that are just like, I'm happy to do these things if they come my way. Somebody wants to pay me, great. And then pick 3 things that you were just not going to do anymore. And I didn't do that for myself because I wasn't doing enough coaching at the time to self-coach. But that was helpful for me to figure out, like, my job had moved really heavily IT, even though I was a production guy. And I was like, I'm just not going to do IT anymore. I will do IT, and if it's in a certain context, and if it paid really, really well or something, but I was just tired of doing that. And so for me, naming those things is actually what helped me like figure out the box that I was going to be in. That actually might be the first step in defining your values, is actually challenging what you believe and what you want to do. So I think even if you and I were going to have more of a conversation around like, all right, what are the things you value? And you're like, you're not sure. I would say, well, would you want to do this? And you're like, gosh, no. It's like, hey, you're touching upon a value, even if you haven't stated it. So talking about it that way. As far as the defining enough part, that was just through the process of, there's a little bit of doubt of like, was this going to work for the first little bit? And maybe after 6 months or so, I was like, hey, this is working. And then it was a little bit weird because that was right when we were about to have my daughter, my second kid. And that was a little bit scary of a time. Like, this is not time to leave your job or do those things. Is that smart? And I was like, I need to do this. And it paid off. And then that's when we started realizing like, wait, this is still working. And if we're not doing the daycare thing, it re-engineered the way that we looked at money and we looked at time. And so if we can fix this and find a way to do that and put our family first and put time together first, and then find a way to still make a living off of that, for me, at that time, that's what was enough. Was, can I continue to work for myself and make a living so that we can continue to just live? And that's what it was. And I made, within the first year, made a little bit more than what I was making at my full-time job. And so for me, I was like, all right, this is great. And then over time, I had a lot of people who were challenging of like, cool, that's great. What's your next thing? What's your next thing? What's your next thing? And I was like, whoa, my next thing is I want to do this for the rest of my life. And so it wasn't necessarily like, yeah, so you hit this number, then hit the next number, then hit the next number. I was like, well, let's press pause on that. Again, happy to grow, but I don't want to just pick, 200,000 and just hustle towards that, because I knew that wasn't in line with my values. So that was a little rambly. I hope that was helpful, because it's like, again, it's a journey. It's not like I sat down and wrote down what's enough for me on paper. It was like, is this working? And it was like, enough was making a living while working for myself and still having some of that freedom.
Absolutely. And I think my question was also meant to kind of see like which came first, the chicken or the egg, which is like
Yeah.
the entrepreneurship or the realization, if that makes sense, of what it meant to define your work for yourself. Sometimes you can, as we've pointed to, and as you said, you can get into it unconsciously, start growing, and then what you're managing, if you don't sit back and ask yourself, okay, what is it for, or attribute more. And I think that intentional growth is in 2 ways, right? Like whether it's, oh, you've got all this buzz, what are you going to do with it? Or if it's oftentimes I think with creatives, having the drive, having the vision, but not connecting it to enough metrics. Yes, money is a metric, but when there's a low satisfaction, but there is money still, or there isn't, as you said, that kind of evaluation of like, okay, should I be attending this as a supporter? Should I be trying to get on the stage? Or should I, right? Like, what is my place in this space? Am I curious, or do I know that this is for me? Right? Like, and
Yeah.
even asking those questions and being able to build on those, I think I found is a part of the ongoing practice, right, of enough and of especially creative entrepreneurship, even solopreneurship, where you're having that conversation primarily with yourself and then with collaborators here and there. As you said,
Yep.
like the parameters are going to change for every project in that case. And if you're the constant, you know it what you're about, then you've got that longevity, that you got the more potential for that longevity. Because yeah, I really hope that we can continue this conversation, and we'll have this replay up. Where, Alex, would you like us direct? Is it YouTube?
Let's do it because I am working at getting better at putting my own content on YouTube and would
Yeah.
love to have that there so that we can continue the conversation there.
Awesome. Because basically what we're looking to do is create a feedback loop. So first of all, thank you to all of you who are here live. If you got value out of this, really want you to consider sharing this with your entrepreneur friends, with any of your collaborators, that we have this space here and that you can connect with various business owners. We've got more events coming up throughout the week, so I've got those shared here in the chat for you. And again, thank you so much to you, Alex. I think this is a really important conversation to have at various stages.
Yeah.
Is just like, yeah, what is meaningful here, as so many things do shift throughout the different stages of business, of entrepreneurship.
Yep. Absolutely.
And life.
Oh, yeah. It's all about life because you can't really separate the two. You could try, but it doesn't work.
That's fair. That's fair. We are what we do and so much more. And I was going to ask, is there any, with the change in season for you, do you find that for seasonal businesses, right? Like, is there anything that you would speak to that in particular? Like when you talk about growing, I feel like it's interesting, always interesting to me. Um, I don't, I remember one time I spoke to a Novo community member who's a photographer, wedding photographer. He explained how he's booked out like a year or 2 years sometimes.
Yeah.
Um, and I find that so interesting as far as like the concept of like how of success, measures of success, right? And then for those of us or for business owners for whom, the summer is whoo, it's like got so much going on. And
Yeah.
then, so is there anything with that like fluctuating sort of business model that that maybe we can point to some of the metrics there or some of the opportunities there? I don't know if that's too granular, but I was just curious about like when we talk about time and like and money and cash flow and stuff, like it's I definitely am used to the more consistent flow there. But when we think about like how to evaluate, I was just curious if you had any take on that.
No, I really like that question. And I was even thinking, as you had said something earlier, almost like flipping the script on the enough question is helpful too. So even like asking myself, I got in this business to be able to have freedom to do creative things for myself. Okay. Well, the other way of saying enough is, do I have enough time to actually do those things? And I think that's interesting, especially with seasonal work, because I think our first reaction with seasonal work is, oh gosh, oh no, it's not going to work. I'm going to be stressed out because, especially leading a full-time position, we are used to consistency and we need consistency. And that's literal. Like, you got to pay your bills, you got to pay your family, like, you have to eat. That's understandable. I think, though, we get really scared by that because the truth is, as a business owner, you have the power to make consistency. And so what I was challenged by a couple of years ago is I was working with a client, or actually we were collaborating together on a project. And she was like, yeah, December is such a slow month for me. I just take the month off. And I was like, you genius. I love that. Because that's what I've learned is like a lot of my event stuff is ramped up through here. Then through the winter will be a little bit low. But instead of seeing that as oh gosh, this isn't going to work, it's how do I prepare for that? Because essentially what's happening is I'm going to have more freedom to figure out here's what the other stuff that I want to do. And whether or not that's, how that plays into your values is different. Like, you could still use that time and say, I'm just going to work on content. I'm just going to work on marketing. But that's where like you have the freedom to say, if you have the time to take a month off, what do you need to do to take that month off? For me, typically it's just, here's how much I need to have in the bank, make sure I have a plan for it. And then I never fully stop work. but I give myself a little bit of time to, figure out those things. I think a lot of us just naturally assume that if we stop working in that capacity, our business will fail. And I think, if you do that unintentionally, maybe that's a risk for sure. There's no reason that you have to be stressed out. Maybe it just doesn't work this year. But if you find out in the coming years, and we'll say wedding photographer again, say you're not booked out for years, and you know that straight up nobody's doing a wedding in, we'll just say December, which I highly doubt. I'm sure people are doing plenty of weddings there, but let's just say there's a season that that's coming up. Do you have what it takes to plan ahead for that time so that you can take that off? And if not, is there a way you could add a new project? Or do you just say, I'm not going to take that time off. I'm going to find something else to do in that time and then come back around the next time. But I think the freedom that we sense in that is our gut reaction is, oh no, this is a bad thing. I'm scared. Understandable. If we can reframe that and say, what I really want to do with my life is this, my meaningful work is this, I'm going to work as hard as I can to build up so that I can do that thing. That right there, that's like why we work for ourselves, is that freedom, that autonomy, that agency to say, this is my business, this is how I do it, this is why I exist, so I'm going to do that. And I think just being really bold in that, I think just gives you a lot of energy as a business owner to say, like, yes, this is what I want. Yes, I'm going to do it. And I'll throw it back to this shed. I have wanted a creative space of my own, apart from my kids and the dogs, where I can have space to just create. And until I worked for myself, I would have never had the time or the capacity or even the finances. Like this I bought the shed initially. This was a $10,000 purchase to just get the shed, and I'm DIYing the inside of it. That would have never happened had I not worked for myself. And so I think finding those things that maybe you put on the shelf and you're like, well, that's a dream, but I won't get to it. It's like, we're business owners. We make dreams come true. And that could be your dream. That could be your client's dream. But like, just think about the power and the agency that you have to say that. Because if you're here on this call listening, I know you can do it. And again, my business is around like, I want to help you do it. But like, I think if you really are bold about that and name your values, you can do that thing that you're wanting to do, even if it feels scary. So go do it. Yeah. Thanks for hyping me up there. This is the stuff that I want to talk about with business owners, because this is like what actually matters. When you look back on your life and look back on your business, you're going to say, yes, I wanted to do that for years and I got scared. And then I finally got a little bit unstuck and I did it, or I took action towards it and I realized I didn't want it and I found something else. Like, that's the story that I want for any business owner I meet. So thanks for tuning me up.
Beautiful. Absolutely. Absolutely. My pleasure. My pleasure. And I feel like it ties back to that, like being able to look at money, time, and your values, and like just shifting that perspective and allowing yourself to adapt. And like, I just, yeah, I love the way that came out to. Thank you so much, y'all, for joining in. We are like 5 minutes to the hour, so I'm going to give you that for the rest of your afternoon.
Let's do it.
And yes, just thank you so much again to you, Alex. Looking forward to the next one. And y'all can stay in touch with Alex again. Here is and I got so wrapped up in the conversation. Here is Alex's website.
Thank you.
I got it memorized, which is, as you will too, alexandersawyer.com.
Nice.
And that is production, consulting.
Yeah. Producing, coaching. So if you need help with a creative project, I do that. If you just need help with the coaching side of it, do that. If you really want to change your life, you put the two things together and bam, we have a lot of fun.
Ayo, I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, y'all. Take good care and talk to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much.